I still keep the carbon copy of the intake form in my desk, even though the original vanished from the archives 60 years ago. In 1958, a woman walked into the precinct dripping wet from the rain and told me she'd watched a man die in a dark alley. She gave her name, signed the paper, and looked me in the eye. But when I came back the next morning, she wasn't just missing. Her address was a vacant lot. Her name wasn't in any census. The night shift sergeant swore I'd spent the evening alone. How do you protect a witness who, according to history, never existed? The rain in 1958 didn't wash the city clean. It just made the grime slicker. It was a Tuesday in November, the kind of night where the damp cold settles into your bones and refuses to leave. I was sitting at my desk in the 4th Precinct, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The radiator in the corner was hissing and clanking, trying to fight off the chill coming through the single-pane windows. I was 45 then, just old enough to be tired, but young enough to think I could still fix things. I was the only detective on the floor. The rest had clocked out or were down at O'Malley's, trying to forget what they'd seen that day. It was quiet, except for the radiator and the steady drumming of rain against the glass. I was going over a file on a stolen shipment of tires, trying to find a reason to care, when the front door opened downstairs. I heard the heavy oak door slam shut against the wind. Then, the click of heels on the linoleum stairs. Not the confident stride of a lawyer or the heavy boot of a uniform. These were quick, uneven steps. Someone was running, or at least hurrying as fast as they could without falling. I sat up, pushing the tire file aside. The footsteps reached the landing, and a woman appeared in the doorway of the squad room. She was soaked. That's the first thing I saw. Her gray trench coat was dark with water, heavy and dripping onto the floor. She wasn't wearing a hat, and her dark hair was plastered to her forehead. She looked pale, the kind of pale that makes eyes look too big for a face. She stood there, clutching her handbag with both hands, her knuckles white. She looked like she was about to shatter. I stood up slowly. You don't make sudden moves with people who look like that. "Can I help you, miss?" I asked. My voice sounded loud in the empty room. She took a breath, a shuddering gasp. I need to report a murder. Stay with me until the end." This case didn't end the way anyone expected. I motioned to the wooden chair beside my desk. "Take a seat. You're safe here. I'm Detective Jack Miller." She didn't sit immediately. She looked behind her, at the empty hallway, as if she expected someone to be following her right up the stairs. Then, satisfied, or maybe just exhausted, she moved to the chair and sat down. She didn't unbutton her coat. She just shivered. "I'm Eleanor," she said. Her voice was steady, surprisingly low. "Eleanor Vance." I pulled a fresh intake form from my drawer. I remember the sound of the drawer scraping open. I clicked my pen. "All right, Miss Vance, take your time. Tell me what happened." She looked at her hands. "I was walking home. I missed the bus, so I took the shortcut through the alley behind 4th Street, near the old textile factory. I knew the spot. It was a dark slice of nothing between two brick warehouses. No streetlights worked back there. I heard shouting, she continued. I stopped. I hid behind a dumpster. I saw two men. One was on the ground. The other, he had a pipe. A metal pipe. Before I tell you what happened next, consider subscribing. It helps keep stories like this alive. She closed her eyes. He didn't stop. He just kept hitting him, even after the man on the ground stopped moving. I saw the attacker's face when he turned. The light from the factory window hit him. He had a scar right here. She traced a line from her left ear down to her jaw. I wrote it down. Attacker, male, scar on left jawline. Weapon, pipe. Did you see the victim? I asked. Yes, she whispered. He was wearing a suit. A nice one, navy blue. He looked like a banker or a lawyer. Is he still there? I think so. I ran. I didn't look back until I saw the station sign. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 11:15 p.m. If this happened 10 minutes ago, the body was likely still warm. The rain would be washing away evidence by the second. I needed to move, but I needed her statement signed first. Procedure is the only thing that separates us from the chaos. I need your address, Miss Vance, for the record. 402 Oak Street, she said. Apartment 3B. I wrote that down, too. Eleanor Vance, 402 Oak Street. And your date of birth? July 12th, 1926. She was 32. She looked younger in the dim light, but the lines around her mouth showed the stress. I turned the paper around and pushed it toward her. I need you to sign this. Then I'm going to put you in a cab to a hotel for the night. We'll need to talk more in the morning, but I don't want you going home if you're scared. She took the pen. Her hand was shaking, but she signed it clearly. Eleanor Vance. The ink was blue. I remember that because I stared at it for a long time later. Have you ever looked at a stranger and felt certain they were telling the truth, even before you checked the facts? I'll get you some water, I said, and I'll radio a patrol car to check the alley. You stay right here. She nodded. Please, don't leave me alone too long. Just to the water cooler and the radio desk, I promised. I walked out of the squad room and down the hall to the dispatch desk. Sergeant Higgins was there, his feet up on the desk, reading a comic book. He was a good cop once, but he was counting the days to his pension. He didn't look up when I approached. Higgins, I said, send a car to the alley behind the textile factory on 4th. Possible 187. Witness says a man was beaten to death. Higgins dropped his feet to the floor. A murder? Tonight? In this weather? Just send the car, I said. I've got the witness in the squad room. I'm going to drive her to the layout. I grabbed a paper cup and filled it from the cooler. The water bubbled up, loud in the quiet hallway. I walked back to the squad room. I had been gone maybe 90 seconds. 2 minutes, tops. I walked through the doorway, holding the cup. Here you go, Miss Vance. I stopped. The chair was empty. The room was exactly as I had left it. My desk lamp was buzzing. The radiator was hissing, but Eleanor Vance was gone. I put the water down on the desk, carefully so it wouldn't spill, and walked back into the hallway. Miss Vance, I called out. The hallway was empty. The stairs were empty. I ran to the landing and looked down. The heavy front door was closed. There were no wet footprints on the stairs leading down, which struck me as odd, but I figured she might have stayed close to the wall. I went back to Higgins. "Did the woman come past you?" Higgins looked at me over his glasses. "What woman?" "The witness," I said, feeling a prickle of irritation. "The one in the gray coat, soaked to the bone. She just came in 10 minutes ago." Higgins frowned. He took a slow drag of his cigarette. "Jack, nobody has come through that door in an hour. Just you and me here." I stared at him. Higgins wasn't a prankster. He didn't have the imagination for it. "She was just in my office," I said, my voice tight. "She signed a statement. Eleanor Vance. Maybe she came in while I was in the can." Higgins shrugged. "But I didn't see anyone leave just now. And I've been sitting here since you walked up." I felt a cold drop of sweat slide down my back. I turned and walked back to my desk. I needed to see the paper. It was there, the intake form. The blue ink was still drying. Eleanor Vance, 402 Oak Street. She existed. She had been here. She had signed this. But where did she go? I grabbed my raincoat and my hat. "I'm going to the scene," I yelled to Higgins. "If she comes back, hold her." "Sure, Jack," Higgins called back, his tone making it clear he thought I was losing my mind. "I'll hold the ghost." I drove my unmarked Ford through the rain. The wipers slapped back and forth, a hypnotic rhythm that usually calmed me down. Tonight, it just annoyed me. I turned onto 4th Street. The streetlights were out, just like she said. I pulled up to the alley mouth. 2 patrol officers were already there, shining flashlights into the dark. It was Miller and Kowalski. Good kids. I got out. The rain hit me like a slap. "What do we have?" Miller shook his head. "Nothing, Detective." "What do you mean, nothing?" I walked past him into the alley. "I mean, nothing," Miller said. "No body, no blood, no sign of a struggle." I walked to the spot she had described, behind the dumpsters. I shone my flashlight on the ground. The pavement was wet, slick with oil and rain, but there was no red, no blood washing into the gutters. "Maybe he wasn't dead," I said. "Maybe he crawled away." "Jack," Kowalski said, pointing his light at the ground. "Look at the trash." I looked. There was a pile of old newspapers and cardboard boxes right where the victim should have been. They were soggy, matted down. If 2 men had fought here, if a man had been beaten to death with a pipe, this trash would be scattered. It would be kicked around. It was undisturbed. The layers of wet newspaper were flat and pristine. "Nobody has been back here tonight," Kowalski said. "Not even a stray cat." I stood there, the rain dripping off the brim of my hat. She had been so specific. The pipe, the scar, the blue suit. If you were me, standing in that empty alley, would you have doubted the witness? Or would you have doubted your own eyes? "Check the hospitals," I said. "See if anyone came in with head trauma." "Will do," Miller said. I got back in my car. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my gut. It wasn't just a false report. People make false reports for attention or revenge. But Eleanor Vance didn't look like she wanted attention. She looked like she wanted to disappear. And she had. I started the engine and drove toward Oak Street. I needed to find her. I needed to know why she lied, or if she was confused. Maybe she got the street wrong. Maybe it was 5th Street. 402 Oak Street. I knew the neighborhood. It was a residential area, mostly row houses built in the 20s. I turned onto Oak. I counted the numbers. 398. 400. I slowed down. I stopped the car. There was no 402. At least, not anymore. Where 402 Oak Street should have been, there was a vacant lot. It was overgrown with weeds, even in November. A chain-link fence surrounded it. There was a sign on the fence, "Property of the City." I got out of the car again. I walked up to the fence. Through the rain, I could see the foundation of a building that had been torn down a long time ago. There were saplings growing out of the basement pit. They were 3 or 4 years old at least. I stood there for a long time. The rain was running down my neck now. I had a signed statement in my pocket from a woman who lived in a building that didn't exist, witnessing a murder that left no trace, in an alley that hadn't been touched. I got back in the car. I didn't turn the engine on immediately. I lit a cigarette. The flame of the lighter flared up, illuminating the dashboard. I took a drag and watched the smoke curl up against the windshield. I pulled the statement out of my pocket. Eleanor Vance. The signature was elegant, looped. I drove back to the station. It was 1:00 a.m. now. When I walked in, Higgins was asleep. I went upstairs to the records room. It was in the basement, a cage of metal filing cabinets that smelled of mildew and old paper. I had a key. I turned on the single bulb. I went to the city directory. I pulled the book for 1958. I looked for Vance. Vance, Arthur. Vance, Charles. Vance, Peter. No Eleanor. I went back a year. 1907. No Eleanor Vance. I went back 5 years. 1953. There. Vance, Eleanor. 402 Oak Street. I felt a surge of triumph. She did exist. She just hadn't updated her address in 5 years. That made sense. People move. People forget to fill out forms. But why give an old address? I pulled the file for 402 Oak Street from the property records. I wanted to know when it was torn down. I found the demolition order. Dated October 1954. Condemned after a fire. A fire. I looked closer at the file. There was a police report attached to the fire investigation. My heart started to beat a little faster. It's a feeling every detective knows. The feeling that the ground is about to drop out from under you. I opened the report. Date, October 14th, 1954. Location, 402 Oak Street. Incident, structural fire. Fatalities, 1. I turned the page to see the name of the deceased. Victim, Eleanor Vance, age 28. I stared at the paper. The hum of the basement lights seemed to get louder, turning into a buzz that filled my head. I looked at the birth date on the death certificate. July 12th, 1906. The same date she had given me 3 hours ago. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the intake form. The blue ink, the signature. It was right there. I looked at the death certificate again. I was holding a statement signed by a woman who had been dead for 4 years. But ghosts don't drip water on your floor. Ghosts don't sign forms with ballpoint pens. Ghosts don't look you in the eye and tell you they saw a man with a scar. Someone was playing a game. A very elaborate, very dangerous game. I went back upstairs to my desk. The wet spot where she had been standing was still there on the linoleum. It was drying at the edges, but it was real. I sat down. I picked up the phone. I dialed the number for the county morgue. "This is Detective Jack Miller," I said when the night attendant answered. "I need you to check a record for me. A Jane Doe from 1954. Eleanor Vance." "Jack, it's 2 a.m." The voice on the other end groaned. It was Doc Henderson. "Can't this wait?" "No," I said. "And Doc, I need to know if she had any distinguishing marks." "Hold on." I waited. The silence on the line was heavy. "Here it is," Henderson said after a few minutes. "Eleanor Vance. Died of smoke inhalation. October 54. Distinguishing marks. Let's see. Nothing much. Just a small birthmark on her neck." "Thanks, Doc." "Wait, Jack. There's a note here. An addendum." "What is it?" "It says the body was identified by dental records, but there was an inquiry a week later. Her brother claimed it wasn't her. Said she called him the day after the fire." "Did they follow up?" "No. Brother was listed as mentally unstable. Case closed." I hung up. So, maybe she wasn't a ghost. Maybe she ran. Maybe she faked her death 4 years ago, and tonight she slipped up. But why come to me? Why report a murder that didn't happen? And how did she vanish from a police station with only one exit? I looked at the intake form again, and then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Down at the bottom of the page, in the margin, there was a tiny smudge of red. Not ink. It was blood. A tiny, fresh smear of blood. She hadn't just seen the attack. She had touched something, or someone. I wasn't hunting a ghost. I was hunting a woman who shouldn't exist, who witnessed a murder that didn't happen, and who left a drop of blood on my desk to prove she was real. I leaned back in my chair. The rain lashed against the window harder now. What would you do if the only witness to a crime was a woman the world had already buried? I lit another cigarette. I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to get any sleep tonight. The case of the disappearing witness had just begun, and I had a feeling that finding Eleanor Vance was going to be a lot harder than finding a killer. Because how do you catch someone who is already dead? The sun came up on Wednesday like a bruise, purple and yellow behind the heavy smog. I hadn't gone home. I'd spent the hours between 3 a.m. and dawn staring at the spot on my desk where the intake form lay, guarding it like it was the crown jewels. The blood smear had dried into a rust-colored flake. It was the only physical proof I had that I wasn't losing my mind. At 6:30 a.m., the station started to wake up. The day shift rolled in with the smell of wet wool and fresh coffee. Phones started ringing, the jarring, mechanical trill that always sounds like an accusation. I folded the intake form carefully and placed it in the breast pocket of my jacket, right next to my heart. I wasn't going to leave it in the file cabinet. Not after what I'd found in the archives. Captain O'Banion walked in at 7:00. He was a large man who wore his authority like a tight suit. He saw me sitting there, unshaven, eyes red-rimmed, surrounded by cigarette ash. "Miller," he grunted, stopping by my desk. "You look like you slept in a dryer. Go home." "Can't, Cap," I said, standing up and feeling my knees pop. "I caught a homicide last night." O'Banion frowned. He looked at the assignment board on the wall. It was blank. "What homicide?" "Night shift log says all quiet. Higgins said you were chasing ghosts in an empty alley." Higgins was reading comic books, I said, keeping my voice low. "A woman came in, Eleanor Vance, reported a beating death behind the textile factory. I went there. The scene was clean. Too clean." O'Banion sighed, the sound of a man who didn't have time for mysteries. "Jack, if the scene is clean, there's no crime. If there's no body, there's no homicide. Go home. Sleep it off." "She's supposed to be dead, Cap," I said. That stopped him. "The witness. Records say she died in a fire in '54, but she sat right here, dripped water on this floor, and signed a statement." I patted my pocket. I didn't show him the paper. A detective's instinct is a funny thing. It tells you when to speak and when to hold your cards close. Right then, looking at O'Banion's tired, dismissive eyes, my instinct told me to keep the evidence hidden. "You're overworked," O'Banion said, turning away. "Take the day, Jack. That's an order. If I see you here in an hour, I'm docking your pay." He walked into his office and slammed the door. I didn't go home. I went to the one place where the dead still speak, the records hall at the county clerk's office. The rain had started again, a fine mist that coated the windshield of my Ford. I drove automatically, my mind replaying the image of Eleanor Vance. The fear in her eyes was real. You can't fake that kind of terror. It's a biological reaction. Pupils dilating, skin tightening. She was afraid of something specific. "Stay with me. The maze is about to get complicated. I needed to find the brother." Thomas Vance, the mentally unstable man who claimed his sister survived the fire. The clerk's office was a cavernous building that smelled of dust and floor wax. I flashed my badge to the girl at the counter. She pointed me to the probate archives. I spent 2 hours digging through dusty boxes, sneezing from the mold. I found the probate file for the Vance family. The parents had died in a car wreck in '50. Eleanor and Thomas inherited the house on Oak Street. After the fire in '54, the insurance money, what little there was, went to a trust for Thomas. The address for the trust was a sanitarium upstate, but there was a forwarding address from 6 months ago. The St. Jude boarding house, 88 Canal Street. Canal Street was the Narrows. It was where people went when they ran out of luck, money, and friends. It was a place of transient hotels, pawn shops, and bars that opened at 8 a.m. I drove down there. The neighborhood felt like it was holding its breath. The buildings leaned over the street, casting long shadows even at noon. I found number 88. It was a brownstone with peeling paint and a stoop that sagged in the middle. I walked up the steps and rang the bell. A landlady with hair the color of steel wool answered. She looked at my badge like it was a dead rat. "I'm looking for Thomas Vance," I said. "Third floor, room 12. Don't upset him. He pays his rent in cash and he's quiet. I like quiet." I climbed the stairs. The carpet smelled of cabbage and stale tobacco. I knocked on room 12. "Go away," a voice said from inside. It was brittle, high-pitched. "Police," I said. "Detective Miller, I need to talk to you about Eleanor." There was a silence, a long, heavy silence that stretched for 10 seconds. Then I heard the sound of 3 different locks sliding back. The door opened a crack. An eye peered out. It was wide, blue, and terrified. "Eleanor?" he whispered. "I saw her last night, Thomas." I lied, or maybe I wasn't lying. "I need to know if she's safe." He opened the door. Thomas Vance was a thin man, seemingly held together by nervous energy and suspenders. His room was a chaotic nest of newspapers, clipped articles, and maps taped to the walls. But it wasn't the chaos of a madman. It was the chaos of an investigator. "You saw her," Thomas said, not asking. He gestured for me to sit on a crate. "She came to the station." "Yes." "She reported a murder." Thomas let out a sharp laugh. It sounded like glass breaking. "She didn't report a murder, Detective. She reported a correction." "What does that mean?" Thomas went to his mattress and pulled a shoebox from underneath it. He sat down and opened it. It was full of envelopes. "They told me she died," he said, his hands trembling as he held a letter. "They showed me a body, burned beyond recognition. But the teeth, they faked the records. I knew it. Eleanor has a crooked canine. The body had perfect teeth." "Why did she run?" I asked. "Who is she hiding from?" Thomas handed me a letter. "Read it." I took the envelope. It was postmarked from the city, dated 3 days ago. I pulled out the paper. The handwriting was looped, elegant. The same blue ink as the intake form. "Dear Tommy, I saw him again. The architect, he hasn't aged. They are digging the new foundation on Monday. I have to stop them. If they pour the concrete, the truth stays buried forever. I'm going to go to the police, but I don't know who to trust. I'll try the 4th precinct. Keep your head down. Love, L." I stared at the letter. "The architect?" "That's what she calls him," Thomas whispered. "The man who bought our building before the fire. He wanted the land. We wouldn't sell. Then, the fire. Who is he?" "She never writes his name. She says names are dangerous, but she says he wears a blue suit. Always a blue suit." My blood ran cold. The victim in the alley. Eleanor said he was wearing a navy blue suit. "Thomas," I said slowly, "last night, Eleanor said she saw a man in a blue suit get beaten to death. She said she saw the attacker." Thomas's face went pale. "No, that's not right. The man in the blue suit isn't the victim. He's the boss. He's the one who orders the fires." "She was clear," I insisted. "She said the victim looked like a banker. Blue suit." Thomas shook his head violently. "Then she's confused, or she's setting a trap, Or, he looked at me with sudden, piercing clarity. Or, you're lying. I'm not lying. Did she sign anything? Thomas asked. Yes, an intake form. Do you have it? It's in my pocket. Let me see. I reached into my pocket. I felt the rough fabric of my jacket lining. My fingers brushed against my notebook, my cigarettes, my lighter. My heart hammered against my ribs. The pocket was empty. I stood up, checking my other pockets. Pants, overcoat, shirt. Nothing. It was here, I said, my voice rising. I put it here this morning. Thomas stared at me. His expression shifted from fear to pity. They got to you, detective. Just like they got to the fire inspector. Just like they got to the dentist. Nobody got to me, I snapped. I've been... I stopped. I remembered the collision. On my way into the boarding house, on the front stoop, a man had bumped into me. He was wearing a delivery uniform. He had mumbled an apology and brushed past. He had patted my chest, a gesture of apology. A pickpocket. A professional. I have to go, I said. Wait, Thomas said. He grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. If they took the paper, they know you have it. They know you saw her. You're part of the story now, detective. You can't just read it anymore. Who is they, Thomas? The people who build the city, he said. The ones who decide which buildings stand and which ones burn. I pulled my arm free and ran down the stairs. What would you do if the evidence vanished from your own pocket? Would you question your memory, or would you start looking for the thief? I burst out onto the street. The rain was heavier now. I looked up and down Canal Street. No delivery man, no truck. But across the street, parked 3 cars down, was a black sedan. A Lincoln, tinted windows. The engine was idling. I could see the exhaust puffing into the cold air. I walked toward it. I wanted to see who was inside. I wanted to drag them out and ask them who sent the pickpocket. As I stepped off the curb, the Lincoln gunned its engine. It peeled away from the curb with a screech of tires, swerving into traffic and disappearing around the corner. I didn't chase it. My Ford was too slow, and I was too tired. I got in my car and just sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I was 45 years old, and I had just been rolled like a tourist. I needed a name. I needed the name of the man with the scar. Eleanor had described him perfectly. Scar on the left jaw, metal pipe. I started the car and drove to a pool hall on 8th Avenue. It was called The Pocket. It was run by a man named Benny the Ear Russo. Benny knew things. He was a rat, but he was my rat. I found Benny at the back table, racking balls. He was a small man in a vest that was too big for him. Jack, he nodded, not looking up. You look like trouble. I need a name, Benny. I'm retired. Nobody retires from knowing things. I threw a $10 bill on the felt. Guy with a scar, left jawline. Looks like a professional, maybe works as muscle. Benny picked up the bill and tucked it into his vest. He chalked his cue. Scar on the jaw. Left side? Sounds like Julian Vane. Who is he? Not Muscle Jack. He's a fixer. Used to be a cop in the 6th Precinct about 10 years ago. Got kicked out for excessive force. Now he works private security, high-end stuff. Protects rich people from their own mistakes. Where can I find him? He keeps an office over the hardware store on Main. But Jack? Benny looked at me, his eyes serious. Vane is bad news. He doesn't just break legs. He breaks lives. He digs up dirt and buries people with it. Thanks, Benny. I walked out. Julian Vane, an ex-cop fixer. If Eleanor saw Julian Vane beating a man to death, she wasn't witnessing a random mugging. She was witnessing an execution. But why would a fixer kill a man in a blue suit in an alley? Fixers are paid to solve problems, not create bodies. I drove to Main Street. I found the hardware store. There was a door next to it with a frosted glass pane. Vane Investigations. I went up the stairs. The hallway echoed with my footsteps. I reached the door and tried the handle. Locked. I knocked. Vane, open up. Police. No answer. I kicked the door. The lock was cheap. The wood splintered. The door swung open. The office was empty of people, but it wasn't empty of presence. A cigarette was still burning in the ashtray on the desk. Smoke curled up in a thin gray line. I walked in, hand on my revolver. Vane? The room was sparse. A desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, and a wall covered in photographs. I walked over to the wall. My breath hitched. The photos were of me. Me entering the station last night. Me leaving the station. Me at the vacant lot. Me at the boarding house this morning. There were photos of Thomas Vance, too, and photos of the vacant lot on Oak Street, taken from different angles. And right in the center of the wall, pinned with a red thumbtack, was a black and white photo of a woman. It wasn't Eleanor Vance. It was a woman I recognized. She was the wife of the city comptroller. I had seen her picture in the papers. Why was Vane tracking me? And why was he tracking the comptroller's wife? I heard a floorboard creak behind me. I spun around, drawing my gun. Standing in the doorway was a man. He was tall, wearing a trench coat that looked expensive. He had a hard, angular face, and running down his left jawline was a jagged, white scar. Julian Vane. He didn't have a gun drawn. He was holding a file folder. He looked at me, then at the gun in my hand, and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Detective Miller," he said. His voice was like gravel in a mixer. "You're trespassing." "You're under arrest," I said. "For what? Breaking my own door lock?" Vane stepped into the room, ignoring my weapon. "Put the toy away, Jack. We're on the same side." "I doubt that," I said. "I have a witness who saw you beat a man to death last night." Vane stopped. The smile vanished. He looked genuinely confused. "Last night? Jack, last night I was sitting in a holding cell at the 12th Precinct. Drunk and disorderly. Check the logs." I stared at him. He sounded confident. "If you were in jail," I said, pointing to the wall, "who took these pictures of me this morning?" Vane looked at the wall. "I didn't take those. I just got here. I found them here, same as you." He threw the folder he was holding onto the desk. It slid across and hit the ashtray. "I've been framed, Detective," Vane said. "And by the looks of it, so have you." I looked at the photos again. Someone was watching both of us. Someone who knew I would come here. "Who is the man in the blue suit?" I asked. Vane's eyes narrowed. "There is no man in a blue suit. There's only the suit." "What?" "The blue suit," Vane said. "It's not a person. It's a project. A code name for the new highway development plan. The one that's going to pave over Oak Street." My mind reeled. Eleanor hadn't seen a man in a suit. She had seen what? "The witness," Vane said, stepping closer. "Tell me her name." "Eleanor Vance," I said. Vane laughed. A dry, humorless bark. "That's impossible, Jack." "I know. She's dead." "No," Vane said. "She's not dead. She's not alive either. Eleanor Vance is the name on the deed for the land. It's a dummy corporation. Eleanor Vance isn't a woman. It's a bank account." I felt the room spin slightly. "I spoke to her. She sat in my chair." "Then you spoke to an actress," Vane said. "Or a ghost. But whoever she was, she just led you into the middle of a war you don't understand." He walked to the window and looked out through the blinds. "And Jack," he said softly, "the people we're fighting, they don't use pipes, they use City Hall." I lowered my gun. I had come here to arrest a killer. Instead, I had found a mirror. We were both pawns. But if Eleanor Vance was a bank account, who was the woman with the fear in her eyes, and whose blood was on the form that was now in the pocket of a pickpocket halfway across the city? "We need to leave," Vane said suddenly, backing away from the window. "Now." "Why?" "Because the black Lincoln just pulled up outside. And this time, they aren't here to take pictures." I moved to the window. 2 men were getting out of the car. They were wearing raincoats, and they were carrying shotguns. "Back door," I said. "Way ahead of you," Vane replied. We ran toward the fire escape. I didn't know if I could trust Vane, but as the sound of heavy boots hammered on the stairs below, I knew one thing. I couldn't trust anyone else. The case wasn't about a murder in an alley anymore. It was about something much bigger, and I had just stepped past the point where I could turn back. The fire escape was slick with rain and moss. My shoes slipped on the metal grating as we scrambled down, the sound of our boots lost in the thunder rolling over the city. Above us, the door to Vane's office splintered inward. I didn't look back. I just focused on the rust-colored ladder leading to the alley below. Vane was already on the ground, his coat billowing like a dark sail. We hit the pavement and ran. We didn't speak. We just moved through the labyrinth of back streets, splashing through puddles that looked like black oil. The black Lincoln didn't follow us into the narrow maze. It was too wide, too heavy. But I could hear the sirens starting up in the distance. And for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't sure if they were coming to help me or hunt me. Vane led me to a basement beneath a dry cleaners on 12th Avenue. It smelled of steam and chemicals, a sharp, acidic scent that burned the nose. He picked the lock with a tension wrench he pulled from his sleeve. We slipped inside, and he bolted the door behind us. "Sit," Vane said, pointing to a crate of detergent. He didn't look winded. He looked annoyed. I sat. My hands were shaking, just a little, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. Who were they? Contractors, Vane said, peeling off his wet coat. Not police. Private muscle. Expensive suits, cheap shotguns. That's the architect's signature. The architects, I repeated. You keep saying that. Is it a gang? Vane laughed, a sound like dry leaves crunching. It's not a gang, Jack. It's a boardroom. It's the men who are redrawing the map of this city, and you and I just got caught in their eraser. He went to a small sink in the corner and splashed cold water on his face. The scar on his jaw stood out, purple and angry. The woman, I said. Eleanor, or whatever her name is. Why did she come to me? Vane turned, water dripping from his chin. Because you're honest, Jack. You're a dinosaur. Everyone else in the 4th Precinct is on a payroll. But you just do the job. She needed a witness who couldn't be bought. A witness to what? To a transaction, Vane said. She didn't see a murder in that alley. I saw her face, Vane. She was terrified. She was terrified, Vane agreed, but not of a killer. She was terrified of what she was carrying. Have you ever realized that the thing you were chasing was actually bait? Vane pulled a pack of cigarettes from his shirt pocket. They were dry. He offered me one. I took it. The man in the blue suit, Vane said, lighting us both up. The one, she said, was beaten to death? That was a courier. He was carrying the ledger for the Oak Street development, the payoffs, the bribes, the names of the judges who signed the condemnation orders. And the man with the pipe, I asked. Me, Vane said calmly. I froze. The smoke caught in my throat. I reached for my gun, but Vane just held up a hand. Relax. I didn't kill him. I was hired to intercept him, to get the ledger. I knocked him out. I took the book, but when I turned around... She was there, I finished. She was there, Vane nodded, and she saw my face. She ran. But here's the kicker, Jack. I didn't have the ledger. The courier didn't have it. Who had it? The woman, Vane said. She got to him before I did. She took it. She saw me, bassicked, and ran to the one place she thought was safe. The police station. She gave a fake name, I said, thinking back to the blue ink. She gave a real name, Vane corrected. Just not hers. She gave the name of the victim of the fire that started this whole land grab, Eleanor Vance. It was a message. She was telling the architects she knew about the bodies buried under that vacant lot. I sat back against the cold brick wall. The intake form, the one that was stolen from my pocket. The form she signed, I said quietly. It has her handwriting. If the architects have it now, then they can match it to her personnel file, Vane said. They'll know exactly who she is, and they will kill her before sunrise. I needed to make a call. I needed to warn someone, but who? We need to find her first, I said. We? Vane raised an eyebrow. I'm a wanted man, Jack. And as of 10 minutes ago, you're missing from duty with a suspect. I need to know who she is, I said. You saw the photos on your wall. You recognized her. Vane hesitated. He took a long drag of his cigarette. The tip glowed bright red in the dim basement. Her name is Sarah Miller, Vane said. The name hit me like a physical blow. The air seemed to leave the room. "Miller?" I whispered. "No relation to you, Jack. At least, I don't think so. She's the wife of the city comptroller. But before that, she was Sarah Vance, Thomas Vance's younger sister, the one who didn't die in the fire." I closed my eyes. The pieces were slamming together, loud and violent. The fire in 54 killed Eleanor. Thomas went into a home. But there was a third sibling, a younger sister. She married the comptroller to get close to them, Vane explained. She played the long game, 4 years of dinners, cocktails, smiling at the men who burned her house down, waiting for the moment to steal the proof. She wasn't a helpless witness. She was an operative, a spy in her own home. "She left blood on my desk," I said. "Why?" "DNA wasn't a thing back then," Vane said, "but blood type is. Maybe she was hurt, or maybe she wanted me to look for the fire report." I realized. She gave me the date. She gave me the address. She wanted me to find the death certificate. "She wanted you to find the discrepancy," Vane said. "She wanted a detective to prove that Eleanor Vance was murdered, not just an accident victim." I stood up. "We have to go to the vacant lot, 402 Oak Street." "Why there?" "Because in her letter to Thomas, she said, 'If they pour the concrete, the truth stays buried forever.' They're pouring the foundation tomorrow." So she's not running, Vane. She's going back to the house. She's going to plant the ledger where they can't ignore it. Or she's going to die trying. Vane looked at me. For the first time, the cynicism in his eyes cracked. He looked tired. "It's a trap, Jack. You know that." "I know." "You go there. You lose your badge. Maybe your life." "I lost my badge the minute I let a dead woman walk out of my precinct," I said. We left the basement. The rain had stopped, leaving a heavy, suffocating mist over the city. We stole a car, a beat-up delivery truck, because my Ford was too recognizable. Vane drove. We headed toward Oak Street. The neighborhood was silent, dark. But as we got closer, I saw the lights, floodlights, massive industrial arc lamps cutting through the fog. The construction site was active at 3 a.m. "They're pouring," Vane said, gripping the wheel. "They're trying to cover it up tonight." We parked a block away. We crept through the shadows of the neighboring buildings. The noise of the cement mixers was deafening, a grinding, churning roar that vibrated in my teeth. I saw the pit. The foundation of 402 Oak Street had been dug out deep. Men in hard hats were directing the chutes of wet concrete. And standing on the edge of the pit, looking down, was a solitary figure in a gray trench coat. Sarah. She was holding a thick leather book against her chest. "She's going to jump," Vane whispered. "She's going to bury herself with the book." "No," I said. "She's negotiating." I saw a man approaching her. He was wearing a blue suit. Even from here, I could see the cut was expensive. He wasn't the courier. He was the boss. I recognized him. It was Councilman Drake, the man running for mayor on a platform of urban renewal. He stopped 5 feet from her. He held out his hand. I pulled my revolver. "I'm going in." "Jack, wait!" Vane hissed. "Look at the perimeter." I looked. In the shadows of the construction equipment, men with shotguns were waiting. If I stepped into the light, I was dead. But if I didn't, she was dead. I looked at the phone booth on the corner. It was glowing yellow in the mist. "Distraction," I said to Vane. "Can you give me one?" Vane looked at the cement truck, then at the fuel drums stacked near the generator. He smirked. "I can give you a hell of a distraction." "Do it." Vane vanished into the dark. I waited. I watched Sarah and the councilman. They were talking. I couldn't hear the words over the mixers, but I saw her body language. She was defiant. She held the book over the open pit of wet concrete. The councilman stepped closer. He was losing patience. Suddenly, the world turned white. A massive explosion ripped through the night. The fuel drums. Vane had timed it perfectly. A ball of fire rolled into the sky, illuminating the wet street like noon. The guards turned. The workers dived for cover. I ran. I sprinted across the broken pavement, gun raised. "Police! Drop it!" It was a stupid thing to yell, but it made the councilman flinch. He spun around, seeing me charging out of the smoke. Sarah didn't look at me. She looked at the pit, and she threw the book. It tumbled through the air, pages fluttering, and landed with a wet thwack right in the center of the pouring concrete. It sank immediately. "No!" the councilman screamed. He lunged for her. He grabbed her by the throat. I was 20 yards away. I leveled my gun. "Let her go." He used her as a shield. "You're too late, detective. It's gone." "Let her go," I repeated, my aim steady on his forehead. Then I heard the click of a hammer behind my right ear. I froze. "Drop the gun, Jack." The voice was familiar. Painfully familiar. It was Captain O'Banion. I didn't turn around. "Cap?" "I told you to go home, Jack," O'Banion said, his voice heavy with regret. "Why didn't you just go home?" "You're with them?" I asked, keeping my eyes on Sarah. She was struggling for breath, her face turning red. "I am them," O'Banion said. "Who do you think clears the permits? Who do you think loses the files?" My stomach twisted. The man who had trained me. The man who pinned my badge on. "She's innocent, Cap," I said. "She's a loose end," O'Banion said. "Put the gun down, now. Consider this. Is it betrayal? If you always suspected the system was broken, or does it only hurt when the cracks reach your own feet?" I slowly lowered the gun. "Kick it away," O'Banion ordered. I kicked it. It skittered across the wet pavement. The councilman smiled. He tightened his grip on Sarah's throat. "Good work, Captain. Now, put him in the hole with the book. We'll pour over them both." That's when I knew. If I kept going, there was no way back. I wasn't a cop anymore. I was a witness, and witnesses in this town disappear. "I'm sorry, Jack," O'Banion said. I could hear his finger tightening on the trigger. I closed my eyes, waiting for the flash. But instead of a gunshot, I heard a roar. Not an explosion this time. An engine. The delivery truck. Vane plowed the truck through the chain-link fence, tires screaming. He didn't hit the brakes. He drove straight at O'Banion. O'Banion fired. Bang, bang, wild shots that sparked off the truck's hood. He dove to the right to avoid being crushed. The truck slammed into a pile of rebar, screeching to a halt between me and the captain. "Get in!" Vane screamed, kicking the passenger door open. I didn't hesitate. I scrambled into the cab. "Sarah!" I yelled. The councilman had been knocked back by the impact of the crash near him. Sarah was free. She was on her knees, gasping. "Get her!" I shouted. Vane threw the truck into reverse. We backed up toward her. I reached out to the open door. "Grab my hand." She looked up. Her eyes were wild. She looked at the pit where the book had vanished. Then she looked at me. She reached out. Our fingers brushed. Then a shotgun blast shattered the side mirror. Glass sprayed into my face. "Go!" Vane yelled. "We can't wait!" "Not without her!" I roared. I leaned further out. The truck was moving. Bullets were pinging off the metal door. I grabbed her wrist. She was light, lighter than I expected. I hauled her up. She scrambled into the cab, falling onto the floorboards between me and Vane. Vane slammed the accelerator. The truck fishtailed in the mud, then found traction on the asphalt. We shot out of the construction site, leaving the chaos behind. We drove in silence for 3 blocks. My heart was trying to punch through my ribcage. Sarah sat up slowly. She rubbed her throat. She looked at me. "You came back," she whispered. "I needed my intake form back," I said, trying to sound tough. My voice cracked. She reached into her coat. Her gray trench coat, now covered in mud and grease. She pulled out a piece of paper. It was crumpled, stained. The intake form. "I stole it back from the pickpocket before I came here," she said. "I knew they would destroy it." I took the paper. The blue ink was smudged but legible. Eleanor Vance. And there, at the bottom, the drop of blood. "It's not just a form," she said. "The paper. Look at the watermark." I held it up to the dashboard light. It wasn't standard police issue paper. It was heavy bond. And faintly, in the texture of the paper itself, was a logo, a geometric shape, the logo of the development company. "I didn't just sign a statement," she said. "I signed it on the back of a page I stole from their office weeks ago. The other side, peel it." I picked at the corner. It was 2 sheets glued together, thin onion skin. I peeled them apart. On the back of the intake form was a list, not of names, but of bank account numbers. "The book is gone," she said, her voice trembling. "But I kept the index." I looked at Vane. He was grinning, a bloody, maniacal grin. "Well, Jack," Vane said, "you wanted a case. You just stole the keys to the city." But as I looked at the list, I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach. We had the evidence. We had the witness. But we had nowhere to go. O'Banion knew. The police were the enemy. The city was the enemy. "Where do we go?" Sarah asked. I looked out at the rain-swept streets. "We go to the one place they won't look," I said, "because it doesn't exist anymore." "Where?" "402 Oak Street," I said. "The real one." Vane looked at me like I was crazy. "We just left there." "No," I said. "We left the construction site. But Thomas told me something. He said the foundation they're pouring isn't for a new building. It's to cap the old subway tunnels." "So?" "So, we go underground," I said. We go beneath the concrete before it sets. The city has a different sound when you are underneath it. Up above, it's a roar of traffic and sirens. Down here, in the throat of the subway tunnels, it's a rhythmic, dripping silence. It's the sound of water moving through pipes, of rats skittering over wet rails, and the low vibrating hum of the earth settling under the weight of the concrete being poured 50 feet above our heads. We had abandoned the truck at the entrance to the old service line on 4th Street. Vane knew the way. He had broken the padlock on the grate with a tire iron, his movements efficient and brutal. Sarah went first, her expensive coat ruined, her face a mask of soot and determination. I followed, and Vane pulled the grate shut behind us, wiring it closed with a piece of scrap metal. We walked for 20 minutes in the dark. The only light came from Vane's Zippo lighter, which threw jumping, skeletal shadows against the curved brick walls. The air smelled of mold, rust, and something ancient, the smell of a river that had been buried alive. "Here," Vane said, his voice echoing flatly. "The old maintenance junction. The tracks were pulled up in 45. Nobody comes down here." We stepped into a small, square room cut into the rock. There was a rusted metal table bolted to the floor, and a single wooden chair that looked like it would disintegrate if you touched it. Sarah slumped against the wall, sliding down until she hit the floor. She clutched the intake form to her chest. "Let me see it," I said. I held out my hand. She hesitated, her eyes darting between me and Vane. The trust we had built in the truck was evaporating in the cold damp of the tunnel. "He's a cop, Sarah," Vane said, leaning against the door frame and lighting a fresh cigarette. "If he wanted to kill you, he would have left you in the pit." She handed me the paper. I moved closer to Vane's lighter. I peeled the 2 sheets apart again, revealing the list of numbers on the back. "Bank accounts," I said, squinting at the small, typed digits. "Swiss, maybe? Or Cayman?" "No," Vane said, peering over my shoulder. "Look at the routing numbers. Those are domestic. City Trust, First National." I looked closer. There were dates next to the amounts. The sums were consistent. $5,000, $10,000, every month. "Who gets paid 10 grand a month in 1958? I asked. "Not a person," Sarah said. Her voice was steady now, the fear replaced by a cold, hard anger. "An organization." I traced the column of numbers with my dirty thumb, and then I saw it. A code next to the final entry, P4. "P4," I whispered. "Precinct 4. My precinct." I looked at the next one, P12, Vane's old precinct. "It's not just a bribe," I said, the realization settling in my stomach like a stone. "It's a payroll." "The Blue Suit Project," Sarah explained. "It's the highway expansion. It requires demolishing 6 neighborhoods, thousands of people evicted. To do that without a riot, you need the police to look the other way when the fires start. You need them to lose the reports when people complain." "O'Banion," I said. The name tasted like ash. "It's not just O'Banion," Vane said, pointing to the bottom of the list. "Look at the total. That's millions, Jack. That's the entire police pension fund." I stared at the paper. The pieces clicked together, Not with a satisfying snap, but with a sickening thud. The pension fund had been insolvent for years. Rumors were that the commissioner had gambled it away on bad investments. "They aren't taking bribes to get rich," I said quietly. "They're taking bribes to save the retirement of every cop in the city. Have you ever discovered that the people protecting you were only doing it because they were paid to keep the sheep quiet for the wolves?" "That's why O'Banion turned," I said. "He's not protecting a killer. He's protecting the widows and orphans of every officer who died in the line of duty. If this list gets out, the fund is frozen. The checks stop. Good families starve. And innocent people get beaten to death in alleys," Sarah countered sharply, "like the courier." "Let's talk about that," I said, turning to her. "The courier. You said you saw him die." "I did. But there was no body," I said, "and the scene was clean." "Because the cement trucks were already there," Vane interrupted. "They didn't just pour the foundation tonight, Jack. They've been pouring sections of the highway for weeks. The courier wasn't left in the alley. He was put into a form, and 5 tons of concrete were dumped on top of him. He's a mile marker now." I looked at Sarah. "You knew this. You knew O'Banion was involved. That's why you didn't go to him." "I needed a patsy," Sarah said. She didn't look away. "I needed a detective who was known for being honest, but also known for being expendable. Someone who, if he disappeared, would make a few waves, but not a storm. You used me," I said. "You walked into my station, dropped a trail of breadcrumbs, and waited for me to get killed so the press would investigate my death." "I needed a martyr, Jack," she whispered. "I'm sorry, but look what we're up against. They bought the law. I had to buy a conscience. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to yell. But I was just tired." She was right. In a world this gray, you use whatever tools you have. I was just a blunt instrument. "We have the list," Vane said, checking his revolver. "But we're stuck in a hole, and O'Banion knows these tunnels better than I do. He used to patrol the subway beat in the 30s. As if on cue, a sound drifted down the tunnel. Click, splash, click. Footsteps. Heavy boots moving through water, not trying to be quiet. "They're coming," Vane said. He killed the light. Total darkness swallowed us. The sensory deprivation was instant. I could hear Sarah's breathing, short, sharp gasps. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. "Jack!" O'Banion's voice boomed from the darkness. It distorted, echoing off the wet bricks, so it sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. "Jack, don't be a fool. There's no way out." I gripped my revolver. I had 6 rounds. Vane had maybe 5. "You can't publish that list, Jack," O'Banion yelled. He was closer now. "You know what happens if you do? The department collapses. The city goes to the animals. Is that what you want? Anarchy." "I want justice, Cap," I yelled back. My voice cracked. "Justice is a luxury," O'Banion roared. "Order is a necessity. We kept the peace. We did what we had to do." A beam of light cut through the dark. A flashlight sweeping the tunnel. It caught the edge of the doorframe. "Vane," I whispered. "Go left. I'll take the center." "Don't be a hero, Jack," Vane hissed. "I'm not a hero. I said. "I'm a martyr. Remember?" I stepped out into the tunnel, into the beam of the light. "Here I am, Cap," I shouted. The light blinded me. I squinted, raising my hand to shield my eyes. Behind the light, I saw the silhouette of O'Banion. He was holding a shotgun. Beside him were two other men. Uniforms. Kids I recognized from the locker room. "Put the gun down, Jack," O'Banion said. His voice was shaking. "Please, I don't want to do this." "You already did it," I said. "When you pulled the trigger at the pit, you missed me, but you killed the job. You killed the badge. I'm saving the department. You're burying it." I took a step forward. "Just like you buried the courier. Just like you tried to bury Sarah." "She's not Sarah," O'Banion yelled. "Ask her. Ask her who she really is." I froze. "What?" "She's not Sarah Miller," O'Banion said. "And she's not Eleanor Vance. Ask her about the fire, Jack. Ask her who lit the match." I didn't turn around. "Sarah." From the darkness of the room behind me, Sarah's voice floated out. Cold, detached. "It doesn't matter, Jack." "It matters," I said. "She lit it," O'Banion shouted. "The brother, Thomas, he was innocent. She set the fire to kill her sister, Eleanor. She wanted the inheritance. She wanted the house money to leave town, but the payout was too small, so she got stuck here. She married the comptroller to finish the scam." The air in the tunnel seemed to get colder. "Is that true?" I asked. Silence. Then Sarah spoke. "Eleanor was weak. She was going to sell the house to them for pennies. I did what I had to do to survive. Just like you, Captain. Just like you." The moral high ground crumbled beneath my feet. There were no good guys here, just people fighting over the scraps of a dying city. "Give me the list, Jack," O'Banion pleaded. "We burn it. We walk away. Sarah, she can go. We won't touch her. She's one of us, anyway." It was a tempting offer. Walk away. Go back to my desk. Pretend the stain on the intake form was just ink. But I looked at the form in my hand. I thought about the courier, crushed into the highway. I thought about the thousands of people being evicted for the Blue Suit Project. And I thought about the girl who walked into my station, terrified. Even if she was a killer, the fear I saw was real. She was afraid of the machine she had tried to manipulate. "No," I said. O'Banion sighed, a sound of infinite sadness. "I'm sorry, Jack." He pumped the shotgun. "Consider this. When the truth finally comes out, is it ever as clean as we hope? Or is it always just another shade of dirt?" Bang! The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, but I wasn't hit. O'Banion jerked backward, his shoulder exploding in a spray of red. Vein. He had circled around in the dark. He fired again. The second shot hit one of the uniformed officers in the leg. The third went wild. "Run!" Vane screamed. I grabbed Sarah and we bolted down the tunnel away from the light. Behind us, chaos erupted. Muzzle flashes lit up the dark like strobe lights. Bullets chipped the brickwork around our heads, singing that angry, buzzing song of death. We ran until my lungs burned. We ran until the ground started to slope upward. We saw a grate ahead, moonlight filtering through. Vane wasn't with us. I stopped. Vane! He's gone, Sarah panted, clutching her side. Keep moving. I can't leave him. He made his choice, she yelled. He's the diversion. Don't waste it. We reached the grate. I slammed my shoulder against it. It held. I hit it again. Rusty flakes rained down on my face. Help me! Sarah pushed alongside me. We heaved together. The grate groaned and popped open. We crawled out. We were in a rail yard. The air was cold and fresh. The rain had stopped. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east. Gray dawn. I collapsed on the gravel, gasping for air. Sarah sat on a railroad tie, staring at her hands. They were black with soot. We were alive. But Vane was down there. And O'Banion. I looked at Sarah. The woman who killed her sister. The woman who exposed a conspiracy to save herself. You started the fire, I said. She looked at me. Her eyes were empty. Yes. And you saw the courier die? Yes. And you used me? Yes. She held up the paper. The intake form with the list on the back. But this is real, Jack. The corruption is real. The question is, what are you going to do with it? I took the paper from her. It was heavy, damp, and smelled of the underground. I had the truth. I had the motive. I had the culprit. But justice? Justice felt like a word from a language I no longer spoke. We need a phone, I said, standing up. And we need a reporter, not the police, the press. The press is owned by the mayor, Sarah said. Not all of them, I said. There's a guy at the Chronicle. He hates the mayor. He drinks at O'Malley's. We started walking across the rail yard, the gravel crunching under our feet. I didn't look back at the tunnel entrance. I knew Vane wasn't coming out. He was a fixer, and he had just fixed his last problem. As we walked, I realized something. The prompt for this story. The case didn't end the way anyone expected. I expected to catch a killer. Instead, I found a city built on bones. I expected to save a damsel. Instead, I saved a fratricide. I expected to be the hero. Instead, I was just the delivery boy for the morning paper. Jack, Sarah said softly. Yeah? Thank you. I looked at her. Don't thank me. I'm arresting you as soon as this story goes to print. She smiled, a sad, tired smile. I know. That was always the deal. We walked toward the city skyline, which looked like a jagged set of teeth against the morning sky. The truth had emerged. It was ugly, it was painful, and it didn't fix anything. But it was all we had, and the strangest part, I still had the intake form in my pocket, the one with the drop of blood. It wasn't just evidence anymore. It was a receipt for a soul I couldn't save. We sat in a booth at a diner on the edge of the industrial district. The sun was fully up now, a pale winter disk that offered light but no warmth. The windows were steamed up, hiding us from the street. I smelled like the sewers, a mix of rust, mold, and fear. Sarah sat across from me. She had washed her face in the restroom, but the soot was still ground into her hairline, a black reminder of where we had been. I didn't call the police. I called Eddie Vance, no relation to Sarah, a reporter for the City Chronicle. Eddie was a man who hated the mayor almost as much as he loved whiskey. He arrived 20 minutes later, looking disheveled but awake. I slid the intake form across the Formica table. It was stained with tunnel water, but the list on the back was clear. "What is this, Jack?" Eddie asked, putting on his reading glasses. "That," I said, pointing to the paper, "is the end of the 4th Precinct, and the end of the mayor's re-election campaign." Eddie read the numbers. He read the names I pointed out. He looked at the bank codes. His hands started to shake, just a little, not from fear, but from the realization that he was holding the story of the decade. "And the source?" Eddie asked, looking at Sarah. "Anonymous," I said. "She doesn't exist. She's just a ghost who found a ledger." Sarah looked at me. She didn't say anything. She knew the deal. "I need to verify this," Eddie said. "It'll take a day, maybe 2. "You have until the morning edition," I told him. "Because once I walk out of here, the clock starts ticking. If this isn't in print tomorrow, it never will be." Eddie nodded. He took the paper. He didn't ask for a copy. He tucked it into his jacket, threw $5 on the table for our coffee, and walked out. He walked fast. I looked at Sarah. She was tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "You could have let him have the credit," she said softly. "He gets the byline," I said. "I get the collar." "You're really going to do it?" "I have to," I said. "You killed your sister, Sarah. You started a fire that killed a woman. I can't look the other way on that. Even if you did help me burn down the department." She nodded. She didn't cry. She just finished her coffee. "I'm ready," she said. I drove her to the state police barracks, 3 towns over. I didn't trust anyone in the city. I handed her over to a lieutenant I knew from the war. I told him she was a fugitive wanted for arson and homicide in the 54 Oak Street fire. I didn't mention the Blue Suit Project. I didn't mention O'Banion or Vane. I just processed her. When they took her mug shot, she didn't look scared anymore. She looked relieved. It was the face of someone who had been running for 4 years and finally stopped. Have you ever noticed that the silence after a siren cuts off is louder than the siren itself? I went back to my apartment. I didn't go to the station. I unplugged my phone. I put my service revolver in the drawer, and I slept for 18 hours. I woke up to the sound of banging on my door. It wasn't the hit squad. It was the newsboys on the street below. "Scandal!" they were shouting. "Police pension looted. Mayor linked to mob payoffs." I walked to the window. It was raining again. The city looked the same, but the feeling was different. The air felt lighter, or maybe just emptier. I went downstairs and bought a paper. Eddie had done it. Front page. The list was reprinted in black and white. The Blue Suit Project was exposed as a fraud, a money laundering scheme built on forced evictions. I sat on my stoop and read the article. It mentioned an anonymous tip. It didn't mention Jack Miller, but the city knew. When I finally went back to the 4th Precinct that afternoon, the doors were locked. State troopers were guarding the entrance. Internal Affairs was swarming the building like termites in a rotten log. I saw Higgins, the sergeant from the front desk, standing on the sidewalk with a box of his personal effects. He looked lost. "They found O'Banion," Higgins said when he saw me. He didn't look angry. He just looked tired. "Where?" "In the tunnels," Higgins said. "Or what was left of them. He ate his gun, Jack. Down in the dark." I nodded. It was the only way out for a man like O'Banion. He couldn't do prison, and he couldn't face the families whose money he had stolen to save. "What about the other one?" I asked. "The man with the scar?" "They found him too," Higgins said. "Julian Vane. He was surrounded by shell casings. Took 2 uniforms with him. They say he was smiling. Vane went out fighting. I wouldn't have expected anything else. I never went back inside the precinct. I sent my badge in via mail. I retired 2 weeks later. I was 45, but I felt 80. The pension fund was gone, of course, frozen by the courts. I walked away with nothing but my hat and a pack of cigarettes. The trial for the mayor's cronies lasted 2 years. The councilman, the one in the blue suit from the pit, went to Sing Sing for 15 years. The mayor resigned in disgrace, citing health reasons, and moved to Florida. And Sarah Miller, born Sarah Vance, pleaded guilty to manslaughter and arson. She didn't fight. She didn't try to use the corruption scandal to bargain for leniency. She took her time, 20 years. I went to see her once, about 6 months into her sentence. It was a gray Tuesday, much like the night she walked into my station. We sat in the visitation room, separated by a wire mesh. She wore a gray uniform that matched her eyes. "You look good," I lied. "I look like a convict," she smiled. "But I sleep at night. That's new." "They're tearing down the block," I told her. "Even with the scandal. The highway is going through. They just renamed the project. It's the Civic Revitalization now." She laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Of course. You can stop a man, Jack, but you can't stop a machine. The concrete always wins." "Was it worth it?" I asked. "Coming to me? Giving up your freedom just to expose them?" She leaned forward, her fingers gripping the wire mesh. "I didn't do it to expose them, Jack. I did it because I was tired of being Eleanor. I was tired of being a dead woman. I wanted my name back, even if my name had to be on a prison roster." We talked for a few more minutes. About nothing, about the weather, about the food in the cafeteria. When the guard came to take her back, she stopped. "Jack," she said, "that night, in the station, when I disappeared." "Yeah?" "I didn't vanish into thin air. I hid in the ventilation duct in the ceiling. I was right above your head the whole time you were talking to Higgins. I watched you panic." "Why?" "I wanted to see if you would give up," she said. "If you had just shrugged and gone back to your coffee, I would have stayed in the vent. But you didn't. You ran out into the rain. You looked for me." She smiled, a real smile this time. "That's when I knew you were the one. You were the only man in this city who still believed in missing persons." I never saw her again. She died in prison 7 years later. Pneumonia. Or maybe just a broken heart. The system has a way of grinding people down until there's nothing left but dust. Years passed. The highway was built. The interstate cuts right through where Oak Street used to be. Every time I drive on it, I feel the vibration of the tires on the asphalt, and I think about the courier buried somewhere beneath the passing lane. I think about the old textile factory, now a shopping center. I work as a night watchman now. It's quiet work. I walk the halls of a warehouse, checking locks that are already locked. I listen to the rain on the roof. Sometimes, late at night, I take out the carbon copy of the intake form. I kept it. It's the only thing I have left from 1958. The blue ink has faded to a pale violet. The drop of blood on the bottom is just a brown smudge, indistinguishable from a coffee stain. Eleanor Vance. A name that belonged to a dead woman, signed by a killer, on a form that brought down a government. I look at it, and I wonder about the nature of truth. We think of truth as a light, something that banishes the shadows. But in my experience, truth is more like a fire. It burns everything it touches. It clears the ground, sure, but it leaves you standing in the ashes, choking on the smoke. I lost my career. I lost my pension. I lost my faith in the badge, but I kept my memory. I remember the smell of the rain that night. I remember the fear in her eyes. I remember the sound of Vane's truck hitting the fence. And I remember the choice. The moment in the tunnel when O'Banion offered me a way out. I could have burned the list. I could have walked away rich. Why didn't I? It wasn't because I'm a hero. I've told you I'm not. It's because of the silence. If I had taken the money, I would never have been able to sit in a quiet room again. The ghosts would have been too loud. Now, I sit in my booth at the warehouse. The rain taps against the glass. It's a rhythmic, steady sound. It reminds me that the world keeps turning, washing away the sins of yesterday, making room for the sins of tomorrow. The case of the disappearing witness is closed. The files are dusty. The people are dead. The city has moved on. But sometimes, when the fog rolls in off the river and the streetlights flicker, I see them. I see a man in a blue suit waiting on a corner. I see a gray trench coat disappearing into an alley. I see a black Lincoln idling at a curb. And I wonder if we ever really catch anyone, or if we just chase our own shadows until the sun goes down. I'm an old man now. My voice is raspy, and my hands shake when I light my cigarette. But I'm still here. I'm still watching, because someone has to. That's the job. Even when you don't have the badge anymore. You watch the dark, and you try to remember the names of the people who walked into it and never came back. So, that's the story. It didn't end with a parade. It didn't end with a medal. It ended with a quiet room and a piece of paper in a drawer. But that's how the real stories end, isn't it? Not with a bang, but with a long, slow exhale. I'm going to finish my coffee now. The sun is coming up, and the night shift is over. The rain has stopped for now. But before I go, I have one question for you. You've listened to me ramble for an hour about phantom witnesses, buried ledgers, and the price of a conscience. You've walked through the mud and the blood with me. And what's the strangest case you ever heard of? I'd like to read your stories in the comments.